Did Olympus ever make an interchangeable lens rangefinder camera? Well, that's the question I've asked myself, and my search led me to this. The Olympus Ace, or more specifically, the Olympus Ace E. Hello everybody, I'm Laszlo Vasco, and on my channel we've been exploring the story of cameras and photography for the past 130 years, starting in the 1890s with box cameras right when roll films came out. We've been going decade by decade, and recently we've been shooting cameras from the 1950s. I've been looking at SLR cameras from the 1950s and interchangeable lens rangefinder cameras. And this is the third and final interchangeable lens rangefinder camera that I'm reviewing, indeed the Olympus Ace. For those that have been with me, you know that in particular, I collect and love to use Minolta cameras from Japan, Voigtlander's cameras from Germany, and Ensco cameras from the US. Now, for the 50s, I did not have, and there weren't available any Ensco cameras worthwhile, I would say, to review, and certainly no Ensco cameras with interchangeable lens cameras. I know that that is a big disappointment to all of you Ensco fans, but please join me in a little bit when I look at the 1960s. I think you'll have the last laugh. We'll indeed be reviewing further Ensco cameras for that decade. But anyway, back to the Olympus Ace. So you may not have heard of this. When you think of Olympus, certainly there are a wide range of cameras that Olympus was very well known for. The Olympus Pen, of course, the Pen series, the half frame cameras that came out both in fixed lens, interchangeable, and even SLR format, and then their amazing Olympus 35mm SLR cameras from the 70s, and we'll be looking at one of those. And then, you know, progressing on through the 80s and into the digital era. So let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. The Olympus Ace was released in 1958, and initially it didn't have a built-in light meter. This Olympus Ace E was subsequently released in 1959, adding the selenium coupled built-in light meter. The camera wasn't revolutionary by any means. It featured a leaf shutter, which was somewhat rare, although interestingly enough, all three rangefinder system cameras that I'm reviewing from the 50s all feature leaf shutters as opposed to focal plane cloth shutters. But for Japan, that was a little bit more rare. In terms of the styling, it is a somewhat plain but finely finished camera is the way I would say it. And it is slightly smaller and slimmer and lighter than its peers. In fact, you might compare it to the Canon Model 7. It's a slightly, I shouldn't say, I mean, it's slightly smaller, slightly lighter by about 100 grams than the Canon Model 7. If I'm comparing it to the Minolta Super 8, which I reviewed the last time, then you can see that it is fairly similar. It's a slightly shorter. The Super 8 is about the same size and weight as the Canon Model 7. So you can kind of see that these two guys are pretty similar. And weight-wise, you know, to be honest, yes, this is also heavier by 100 grams. It's similar to the Model 7 spec-wise, but it's about the same weight. And I'm comparing it to the Model 7 because it is sort of that same, you know, square look as the Canon, or maybe you won't agree. But long story short, nothing's kind of remarkable. Whereas the Super 8 had some interesting, intricate, fine details on it, and this one is definitely a plainer design. Being a leaf shutter camera, it also has the limitation of not having lenses fast enough, as fast as the focal plane shutter camera. So we know that the Canon rangefinder cameras, they even had a 0.95 lens, a super fast lens, but they all, had f1.4 lenses. The Minolta here has, as you've seen, a 1.8 lens. Well, the fastest lens you could get for this is only f2.8. And in fact, it only came with 4 lenses. It came with a 35mm f2.8. That's what's on here right now. It came with a 45mm f2.8, which is this one. And then it came with 2 80mm lenses. This little guy is the 80mm f5.6. Not very fast at all. And then there's a bigger, chubbier version of it, which was an f4. I've not been able to obtain that one. But the neat thing is with all of these is, as you could see, they're tiny. They're really small. So the whole system together, so even though the camera itself is only marginally lighter and smaller than its peers, jointly with the lenses, it is a pretty small, slim system. Now, comparing it to the Minolta Super 8, on here I have the 35mm lens mounted, and you will note that this is actually slimmer than the Olympus, and that's because this lens really is all inside. It mounts really inside the camera. But to note, this is only an f3.5 lens versus the f2.8 lens for 35mm on the Olympus. But anyway, let's put this aside. I'm supposed to be reviewing the Olympus. Keep coming back to my favorite camera. But back to the Olympus. So let's take a look at these in a little bit more detail. The lenses on this side, there is a little tab that you press, and that allows you to take the lenses off. Now, one of the things you'll immediately notice, which then immediately explains why these only had max f2.8 lenses, the opening for the lens is really small. And it used a Seikosha SLV shutter, which is a great shutter in itself. Probably just reusing it from their fixed lens rangefinder cameras, and that's what they mounted in here. And because of that limitation, you really are limited to f2.8 for the lenses. Now, at the time, I'm sure that did not make this camera popular, and indeed they were only made from 58 to 61, so they weren't the most successful, I suppose. Of note, the Olympus Ace E, this one with the light meter, was also sold in the US as the Sears Tower 19. And I'll talk about that in my next decade when we look at Sears Tower in a little bit more detail. But that aside, this was, I guess, not the most ambitious. As you've known from my previous episodes, I love collecting cameras where they are ambitious, when a manufacturer really tries to hit it out of the park and build something sophisticated. And that's why I like the Minolta Super 8, Minolta's efforts at a high-end interchangeable lens camera. And same for Voigtlander. The Olympus Ace, you can notice immediately that that's not the case. But it doesn't make it a bad camera, and it doesn't make it a cheap camera either. So when you start shooting with it, what you'll notice is that it feels very smooth. The winder is very smooth, very finely crafted. It almost feels fragile, and because it has such a fine feel to it, but it definitely doesn't have, it has an austere look to it, without a lot of fancy bells and whistles, but it doesn't feel poorly crafted and built. So let's look at the features further in more detail. It is pretty straightforward, and it kind of I'm not sure if this set the scene for Olympus's later camera, but it already has Olympus's approach of having the aperture setting at the end of the lens and the shutter speed on a dial behind the lens. And of course, that featured in later on with Olympus's SLR cameras as well. So it was a common feature for Olympus to feature it that way. So indeed, you set the shutter speed all the way from 1 second to very nice smooth shutter. 1 second to 1/500th of a second with the ring. And as you turn the ring, the shutter ring or the aperture, as you turn the shutter ring, it rotates a dial inside the meter readout window, which is a pretty neat, nifty, round readout window on top that I think just fits the camera really nicely. So it is coupled to it. So the shutter speed rotates the aperture settings on the readout dial, and that way, as you read off the speed, the aperture setting, it is matched to the speed. So that's a nice feature. In terms of setting your ISO, it's on the bottom, and you set it with this knob, and from ISO 6 to 800, and you could further set your flash sync setting between M and X with this little tab, and these are really tiny. It took me a while to find the flash, even though it's sort of right there, but I was looking all around, like, how on earth you set it? You could see that the readout for it is up on top, set inside that flange, and that's how you set that. And then, you focus. The rangefinder on this one is rather faint. I have a feeling somebody took it apart and cleaned it. So I haven't tried another one. I can't confirm, but I would be willing to bet that they should be stronger on other copies. I was able to shoot with it fine, so it didn't bother me. But compared to the other ones I've been using, indeed, this one was fainter. And what's nice with this version is that the selenometer still works. It worked perfectly, and gave right about the right shutter speed. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. To rewind, you press the button at the bottom. This flips up, and the back opens up with standard way. And it is a pretty straightforward camera that makes a great travel companion. I would not make a big deal about the f2.8. What's nice is that the 35mm lens is an f2.8 too, and that is actually faster than some of its competitors. Again, faster than the f3.5 that was available for the Minolta Super A. And the 45mm f2.8 is a nice focal length. I love shooting with 40 or 45mm lenses. So that is nice. And again, especially with leaf shutter lenses with a top speed of f500, shooting outside, it's even hard to shoot with f2.8. So you wouldn't really be able to use a faster lens anyway. Of course, for inside you would. But for travel photography, which I think is what this is really good for, the f2.8 is perfectly fine. So let's take a look at some more of the images we got from it, from a trip to Maine. I would say that the lens is sharp. You can see on some of these with the buoys, for example. It has a very nice sharp center and corner as well. But I'm not quite, so I'm not a pixel peeper, and I'm not comparing it directly with the Minolta, but my impression is that I got more punchy images, both from the Voigtlander Prominent as well as from the Minolta Super A. I was really pleased with those images, and I would say the images from this camera are fine. So I think it does make a great, travel companion. So should you get one of these? Well, if you collect Olympus cameras, you may already have one, or you may never have heard of it, because again, it's one of the more rare ones. So I would say, yeah, especially if you're an Olympus fan. Otherwise, yeah, well, I'm not sure. It's not a very expensive camera to obtain. The lenses were easy to find as well. They weren't super expensive, so it was easy to put together a kit. And so for that, I think it is a great option, compared to some of the other cameras where, especially with the lenses, they're going to add up. What's nice is that, you'll have a nice compact kit. They're enjoyable to shoot with. So that's it for the Olympus Ace, and please subscribe and check back. We have two more cameras to finish in the 1950s, and then we move on to the 1960s. Thanks very much. Goodbye.